Hey up everyone, welcome to Yarkshire Gamer and one of our regular Troops on Parade features, and today we are looking at the World War One German Naval collection, and this is in 1/2400 scale and it's mostly GHQ models. There are a few tumbling dice in there and a few from a company called WTJ, which are based in the States. I've not featured any naval stuff on Troops on Parade before. It's not easy stuff to photograph, and naval wargaming really is a niche hobby within a niche hobby, and it's not particularly popular. Although it's an absolute favourite of mine, and this collection now of World War One Germans is probably complete. There's not much I can add to this. I've got, as you can see, or we will see in a minute, I've got all the options of all the major capital ships, most of the later pre-dreadnoughts that were kicking around, and a lot of the stuff that was not at Jutland, and we'll talk about Jutland in a second. Things like Scharnhorst and Gneisenau that were sunk pre Jutland, Blucher as well, and I've got some odds and sods in there, like an armed liner, just for a few scenario ideas and games that we've played in the past. This collection was started for a Jutland refight, which we did on the anniversary in 2016 on a couple of occasions. Got plenty of interest in the time through mostly naval history, that sort of stuff, rather than gaming, because as I say, World War One naval gaming, strangely, because I think it's brilliant, is not particularly popular. So let's get down on the table with the camera and have a look at some of the individual ships. So some of you watching this will be fans of World War II naval, and some of you will have never seen this sort of stuff before. So I'm just going to give you a very basic run through kind of the history of the bigger ships as we go through them. I appreciate some of you may know all the stuff already, but it's something to talk about while we look at the ships. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the pre-Dragnot ships, and these were the most common battleships in the late 19th century, early 20th century, and they were distinguished by the fact that they would have main gun armament, and in this case, taking Hanover as an example, with two turrets of two 11-inch guns in. And then they would have a secondary battery, sometimes a tertiary battery, that would go down the side of the ships, and it would be they would be mounted in what were called casemates, which had a limited firing arc. The turret could fire obviously left and right and forward and slightly backwards, maybe to about 40 to 45 degree angle. So you're limited with the number of guns that you can bear on a target, unless you're broadside on, which has been a common thing with naval gunnery over the years. They were relatively slow. 16, 17 knots would be a good speed for one of these ships, and they were superseded by a British ship called Hms Dreadnaught, which I'm sure you're all aware of, and that upped its main armament to one single calibre, and we'll see as we progress through the German ships by date how that progressed with the German Navy as well. I've moved around the table now and we're looking at the remainder of the pre-dreadnoughts. These were the earlier ones, and there was a number of classes of these that were the mainstay of the German fleet prior to World War One, and in fact a number of them, I think it was 5 off the top of my head, saw action at the Battle of Jutland, which is what this collection was originally started with, and they were known as the 5-Minute Squadron, and that was because with the modern British ships that were on in action that day, these particular ships would have lasted 5 minutes in action, because they were so far behind technologically to the likes of even things like HMS Neptune, which were early dreadnought ships that were in action that day. So that's the pre-dreadnoughts. Let's go and see what the Germans did as a response to Dreadnought. So the first proper Dreadnought battleships that the Germans made were these. 4 ships from the class SMS Nassau. And if you can look in there, you can see that they've gone to a number of turrets. They've got 1 fore and aft, and then 2 either side. And thinking about the design of that, they've probably been down the pub before they designed it, because the two wings of guns can only fire in one direction and have a limited arc of fire. The front and rear turrets very much similar to the pre-dreadnoughts, but now you're getting 8 guns broadside with these ships. The speed's increased to 20 knots, which is a bit more respectable. We've still got main inch 11 guns, and we've got a secondary battery of 6-inch guns, and they remain in casemates along the side of the ship. And big improvement for the Germans, and was on a par with the Dreadnought when she came out. Laid down year after the Dreadnought and commissioned in 1909. So 4 ships from the Nassau class. The next progression for the German ships were these, and these are the Heligoland ships, and 4 in the class again, and exactly the same turret layout as the Nassau class. They are bigger and they're better armed. These have 12-inch guns rather than the 11-inch guns from the Nassau class that we just looked at. Great looking ships, lovely models. These are from GHQ. I forgot to mention where these ships are from. So GHQ for them and the Nassau, and then the pre-dreadnoughts are from a company called WTJ, War Times Journal, which are in America, and they're like resin cast. And then some of the older pre-dreadnoughts are done by Tumbling Dice in the UK. So that's the Heligoland class. Moving on to the more modern ships now, and the Germans had 2 relatively similar classes of ships. The Kaiser Class, which had 5 ships in, only which of 4 of which were at Jutland, and the König Class, which were the best German battle or dreadnoughts at Jutland. The Kaiser ships are all 11-inch guns, sorry, 12-inch guns, do apologise, 12-inch guns, and they've moved to a slightly different layout now. We've got what are called super firing turrets on the rear, which means that one turret is above the other, which gives 2 turrets with exactly the same arc of fire. Only 1 turret on the front, but in the centre there's only 2 turrets now, and they are staggered. And although it wasn't particularly liked firing across the deck with the ships, the German regulations said that it could be done in an emergency, and I'm kind of guessing that the Battle of Jutland was one of those emergencies. I'm sure somebody could have cleaned the deck up after the battle. So that's the Kaiser and König classes, which were the better ships in the German Navy in World War I. Now we move on to the creme de la creme of the German Navy in World War One. This is the Bayern and Baden from the Bayern class. Unfortunately for the Germans, these were not available and not in service for Jutland, so they didn't see action there. And this is a big improvement for the Germans. The ships have gone to 15-inch guns, the same size as the Queen Elizabeth class in the British Navy, and they are considered, I consider them to be probably the best ships in World War One. Cracking armour, 350 millimeters of belt armour, approximately 14 inches of armour, and that's a hell of a lot. Also on the turret, managed to make a top speed of 22 knots, which for the weight and size of them is pretty amazing. And if you look at the layout of the guns, you can just see one of the Koenig classes just to the right and above, and that shows you the layout on that, just slightly different from the Kaiser. We've now got super firing guns at the front as well as the rear, and then a centrally mounted turret between the funnels. The Bayern and Baden have gone for super firing turrets front and rear, and that's probably, if you're not familiar with naval wargaming, the ships that you're looking at now are probably the most familiar layout of main gun armament in the in naval wargaming that you might be familiar with, and this is where the progression has come from. Those Pre-Dreadnoughts that we looked at the start of the video, we've come to a battleship that wouldn't look out of place in World War II. So that's the battleships. Let's move on to the glory ships, the battle cruisers, which are certainly my favourites. So the battle cruisers are generally quicker, probably 24, 27 knots. They're a good deal quicker. Supposedly lighter armoured, but in many cases they have a very, very decent level of armour and a decent amount of guns on as well. And we've got a number of ships here to look at. We've got Goeben. Goeben is very famous, ended up fighting for the Turkish, but I've got that for completeness sake, because in the campaign that we're running at the moment, one of the options is that the Germans keep the Goeben and don't send it to Turkey, and that's happened in our campaign, so it's available for tabletop action when we finally get back to playing again. Then Von der Tann, Molk and Sedlitz, three classic German battle cruisers, and if anyone's going to start World War One naval, these are the ships that you want to be buying, because these were in the most actions. Dogger Bank with Blucher, which we're going to look at in a minute, and then of course the run to the south and the run to the north as the precedents to Jutland. Fantastic looking ships, all GHQ, and very much my favourites. And the final three of the big ships, these are Lutzow, Derfflinger and Hindenburg, class of absolutely brilliant German battle cruisers. 4 double turrets, super fire in front and rear, the classic new modern gun layout for battleships and battle cruisers, and these could hold their own against most British battleships. Quick, well armoured. There's nothing to not like about these ships. Derfflinger and Lutzow were at Jutland, part of the run south, run to the north. Hindenburg, I think, was still commissioning or still on its trials when Jutland occurred, so didn't fight in the battle. And again, it is here for completeness sake. So that's a run through the history of the main German battleships. I'll have a quick run through some of the other stuff. Don't want to bore you to death with it, but. Yeah, that's the big stuff. Let's go armoured cruiser. So the next class of ships that we're looking at is the armoured cruiser, and the armoured cruiser had really gone out of date before the start of World War One and had been succeeded by the battle cruiser. However, some of these ships will be well known to you. Certainly the three closest to us: Sean, Elston, Eisenhower, of course, causing havoc down by South America and met their end when they met some British battle cruisers. Blucher, another classic German ship of the time. Lots of mixed armaments on that. A couple of, I think there were 9-inch guns, main front and rear turrets, and then casemates down the side. Sunk at the Battle of Dogger Bank, again by the larger British battle cruisers. But still a great ship and an essential for anyone who's going to collect German World War One. And moving along, those ships are all GHQ, and the Scharnhorst is painted up in a tan colour, which was popular or when it was out in the tropics. And then on the other side of that, we've got Rune York, First Bismarck, and Prince Aldebert, which were the early armoured cruisers. Rune York, I think, were around in World War One. Were very, very much outdated and kept away from anything that might explode them. So I'm not going to go through all the other ships individually. I'm just going to go through some of the classes and talk about where you can get these ships from. So that's the armoured cruisers. So kind of going down the level of armament, if you like. Next up, we've got some light cruisers, and I've placed these next to Baden just so you can get an idea of scale. And these are Rostock and Hamburg. Light cruisers, the principle is still around today. Fast, lightly armed ships, big enough to travel pretty good distances over the ocean, big enough to look after themselves, and fast enough to get away from anything bigger than them that's going to cause them any trouble. Often used as like a headquarters or a squadron leader for destroyers, which we're going to look at in a minute. And these ships are from GHQ again. Excellent. In fact, the Hamburg is from GHQ. Excellent detail. And Rostock is from WTJ, Wartime's Journal, and that's a great print of a ship. So that's light cruisers, and essentially in any naval force. And we'll look at the minnows next, the destroyers. And the final small ship, the destroyer, or before that, torpedo boat. And we've got Goeben in the background, just to give you an idea of scale. And V163, S165, the Germans numbered their destroyers and torpedo boats rather than named them as the British did. And I find it's a bit bland, that really, but there we go. The S165, 163, very, very small, early 20th century torpedo boats. There's not a lot of resilience there. That's going to sink fairly quickly if anything hits it. And then you've got the modern German destroyers, which were very, very good. V27, V26, great looking ships with the black main colouring. And Germans were more aggressive with their destroyers, so these are great for torpedo attacks during your games. So that's a run through, very, very briefly, the German Navy, and I'll just have an overlook of it again before we sign off. So here we have the final shot again, looking over the entire German World War One fleet for World War One. 2001 to 2,400 scale are the ships. Manufacturers here are GHQ, vast majority, WTJ, Wartime's Journal. There is a manufacturer called C&C, but I don't think there's some British ships with it I've got from those, but I don't think there's any Germans. And Tumbling Dice, who are an excellent source of ships for pre-war and some of the stuff that was still around at the start of the war. This collection was built to fight the Battle of Jutland, which you may see on my blog, and I've added to it just to complete extra classes like I've mentioned during the talk through on the ships, so that we've got stuff for campaigns if we need them. So certainly in terms of big ships to light cruisers, this is everything that the Germans had. We've got 19 dreadnoughts, including the two super dreadnoughts, Baden and Baden, 13 pre-dreadnoughts, 7 battle cruisers, 7 armoured cruisers, 19 light cruisers, and 81 destroyers. So that's rather a big collection, but when I do the one on the British, you'll see it's not very big at all. There's a video on my list which shows you how I paint and base these ships, if you're interested in that. And the battles that we've played with these were pre my YouTube channel days. So anything related to gaming, you'll need to go to the Yarkshire Gamer blog and click on the World War One Naval link, and it'll take you back to all the previous posts and our refights of Jutland and our other games. We fight these with a set of rules that I've written myself, and I do keep promising to publish them in some way, shape or form. And what I hope to do in due course is put some videos up of the gameplay and see if people are interested. I didn't get much bite with the Spanish Civil War, but we'll put something up for this hopefully later on in the year. Thanks for watching. I'll do a Troops on Parade on the British fleet fairly soon. See you then.